Hello, everybody. I think we are live, and welcome to the Climate Convergence webinar, What's Next in the Fight to Stop the TMX Pipeline? We called this webinar number 2 because we had previously organized a webinar called What's Next in the Fight to Stop the TMX Pipeline. And we are still fighting the TMX pipeline and anticipate to keep on fighting the TMX pipeline for some time. So we're decided to make this a series. But I wanted to thank everybody who's taken the time to log on very short notice. This was put together in about 3 or 4 days, kind of based on the urgency of some of the developments and some of the lessons we're learning, some of the news we think it's important to know, and also some of the organizing that is happening that we think needs to be amplified and understood and connected with as soon as possible. So again, thank you very much, especially to the speakers who've taken the time and made time very quickly to speak tonight, and then to everybody who's logging on as well. Before we go on, we really need to make sure that we acknowledge that we're on the unceded and unsurrendered territory of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations. And we need to thank them for their stewardship of the land and their leadership in so many struggles, acknowledge their sovereignty and self-determination over these territories, understand that we're a guest, and understand that when we're organizing, we need to keep this as a central focus and something that we really understand. And we say that at the beginning of everything that we organize, and we'll continue to say that, and we'll continue to organize based around that. I just wanted to let people know, my name is Thomas Davies. I'm an organizer with Climate Convergence Metro Vancouver, who organized this webinar. We are going to have 5 speakers tonight. Each has a very awesome biography that I'm going to go through when they're speaking. They're going to be giving updates about what's going on, what's been going on with the Holmes Creek Protection Camp, in the trees around Burnaby, Coquitlam, New Westminster, what's going on in the Colony Farms, and news overall what's going on nationally with the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. We're anticipating that most people that are participating tonight have a kind of basic understanding about the TMX pipeline and why there is opposition. I'm going to give a short summary, and then if you've come here today and this is your first kind of event related to TMX, we'll also be posting some links in the chat that you can follow through if you want to get a little more background information about why all these people are so passionate about this project and stopping it. Also, just so people know, the way that we'll be doing this is we'll have all of the speakers, and then we'll be taking question and answers for as much time as we have on the speakers. So the way that that'll go is if you can type your question or your comment into the chat or the Q&A. And then I'll make sure that we can bring those and direct them to the appropriate speakers as we move through the webinar. I think for a lot of us, Trans Mountain has really been something that right now is kind of ubiquitous with our organizing. It's been, for many of us, 10 years at least that we've been involved in this struggle to stop the pipeline. And there's a lot of good reasons why a lot of us are so passionate about this project. When it was called the Kinder Morgan Pipeline, owned by Texas oil giant Kinder Morgan, and proposed this project to what they call Twin, which is put another pipeline from Edmonton down into Burnaby to be put onto oil tankers to travel either to the United States or other places. And understanding that this project crosses many nations' territory, Indigenous nations' territories, many of whom are explicitly opposed to the project, many of whom are under duress and have been told either you sign this benefit agreement or we're going to build it and you get no benefits without an agreement. And there's clearly not the standard of free, prior, and informed consent as required by the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, which is something that the Canadian government says that it supports and guides its relationship with Indigenous nations. We also understand that if this project goes forward, it gives a lifeline to the tar sands in Alberta. And we know that that is an unsustainable form of energy, that the environmental costs and the ecological burden is just too heavy. There's no way that Canada can meet its even pretty meager climate commitments if this project goes forward and tar sands expansion happens. And we do also know that the bitumen that would be transported through the increase in tankers from 60 a month to 400 a month if this project is completed. There's no cleanup possibility for it. It's basically tar that sinks to the bottom. And that the tanker traffic also is very disruptive to the marine and ecological environments. So that's kind of a brief summary of what's going on. What's worse is that the Canadian government decided to spend billions of taxpayer dollars to purchase a project, and anticipated if it's built is going to cost us $20 billion at a time when there's so many obviously more beneficial projects and ways to spend taxpayer dollars. So that's a short summary of why Climate Convergence has been so opposed to this project and why I think a lot of people are here tonight. But there'll be more links posted if it's something that you want to understand more, if your family and friends are asking you some more questions when you're talking about this. I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to introduce, and I'm not sure, Maureen or Christine, which one of you is going to go first? Okay, good. So I'm going to introduce Christine Turing. Christine's background is in environmental science and biology, with work specifically on species at risk, restorations ecology, and urban ecology. She also occupied the aerial camp at Holmes Creek for 5 days in August, and is an organizer with Protect the Planet, Stop TMX, as well as Extinction Rebellion Buddhists. So her and Maureen are going to give an update on what's going on with that very important center of organizing. So Christine, it's your turn.
Okay. Thanks, Thomas. Great to be here with you all. Thanks for the invite, and 3 cheers for COVID. Nobody's got anything else to do. So yeah, I'm grateful to live, work, and play on Tsleil-Waututh territory. Also all my relations. So I've got the honor and the challenge of speaking on behalf of the diverse group, which is the Holmes Creek kind of protection camp. It's a diverse group, and oh, awesome. So Mo's brought some pictures to kind of give a sense of it for those of us who haven't been able to visit. So the way that we've figured that we'll tell this story is I'm going to give kind of like the first, almost like the intro, the background of how this started, what worked, what didn't work, sub-campaigns we currently have going on. And then Mo is going to take us forward. As we know, as you all know, the camp was raided almost 2 weeks ago now. So Mo's going to take the courage and yeah, kind of share some words of wisdom, how we're moving forward. And then I believe she's got some suggestions up her sleeve as well, which it'll be great to then be followed up by Jane and Laura too. So I also just want to acknowledge there's a lot of other of our land defender friends present. So I just want to tell you all, I see you. I'm really glad that we're all in this together. And I just want to celebrate our collective resilience and commitment to what is good. Yeah, so the Holmes Creek Camp is actually a grassroots project. It is founded as a coalition. So I believe it's 16 environmental NGOs that are kind of, oh, nice one, Mo, there you go. Yeah, so a coalition of not only organizations, but also our Indigenous communities locally. And we've also really tried to align ourselves and communicate with other Indigenous communities along the pipeline, and whether that's showing up to support them, such as up at Mission Flats. Some of our land defenders from Vancouver actually got arrested up there. So big respects to Laura and Susan for that. And several of us went up just to witness because the white president is one of privilege, and you know, the RCMP are tad less brutal perhaps if we're on hand. So it's been really humbling. I'm so grateful to have this opportunity to decolonize certainly my own heart and mind in the company of others. So the camp started off in August, and in fact, huge respects out to Will George, who raised the funds and the work to get that portaledge up there. So it was up there, and the camp was occupied, and there's Mo. It was occupied by 5 tree dwellers, or yeah, I guess there's different names. I've been calling them tree dwellers. So Tim Takaro was up there for 10 days. Curtis Bouty was up there for 7. I was up there for 5, and Mo was up there for 5. And then there was also an anonymous in there. So we successfully closed that window. So basically Holmes Creek Camp is at this really neat junction in Metro Vancouver where yeah, I really struggled with the land acknowledgements, because it's like this point where all these different nations kind of came in, or their territories kind of overlapped. So it's kind of like at the junction of New West and Burnaby and Coquitlam, just to give you a sense of that. And it's basically a long green corridor. It's actually sandwiched by Highway 1 and the rail lines. So it's actually quite a loud place to be. However, it's a tributary of the Brunette River. And in terms of biodiversity, it's so crucial. It's a corridor for wildlife. So we know that there's bobcat, bear, you know, and those are just the big players. There's also salmon in the Brunette. There's even an endangered species in the Brunette, one of 6 populations left in the world that have been around since the last ice age, like literally since the ice sheets were here. You know, a kilometer high ice, and there's the Nooksack dace. So that little fish with quite specific habitat needs is imminently at risk because of this pipeline, because of course, where do they want to put it? Right through the Brunette, which in itself is a huge travesty, because the Brunette is like, it's like the stream keepers.
Christine, we couldn't hear you for a second. I'm not sure if you were muted, but Christine is gone for a second. We will figure this out.
Do you want me to just jump in here since?
Yeah, maybe if
Well, we figure out
if you're able, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so we do have a really special local area that we're protecting. Brunette's got a long history in New West and the Coquitlam and Burnaby of people, local citizens going in and cleaning it up. So to see it destroyed now is very hard locally, as well as, of course, you've also talked about it's got a massive global significance, what's going on here. So there's multiple levels. And I think people in Colony Farm can really relate to that, because I think one of the things that makes us really strong is our connection to place, is our connection and our community, that this place is a place of community for us. And we know what that connection to place, we get a small taste of what, and in seeing it being destroyed, we get a small, very, very tiny taste of what our Indigenous communities have been going through for generations, and watching the places that are sacred to them and where they feel very connected being destroyed. So one of the things that worked well for us was we did have a group like this, I guess, a webinar, and we did a couple different people assemblies so that we could break up into different groups and have people work on different projects. Obviously, some people are much more welcome and ready to go out and do something like full on get arrested, doing a peaceful protest, go lock themselves to a tree. For other people, that's not an option, but maybe they want to be a big part of a letter writing campaign, or on the media side, or organizing other types of protests, letter writings, going and doing presentations to councils, all this stuff. So having these various different projects going, so you have multi-layers of action in your group, is definitely one of the things that I think has led to our group lasting so long and having a pretty good impact. As you can see, this is right after the treehouse was taken. We do have 2 of our people going in to try and direct action, and a lot of people there to support them. I think if you are considering the idea of direct action, like the going up and being in the portaledge was a fantastic experience for me. For 5 days, I felt like a princess in a tower, being completely waited on by everybody else, because you're very dependent on other people. So you need a strong community, and you need to have that. I think they say somewhere between 5 to 10 people on the ground to support every one person who does that kind of direct action. So in the picture here, we have a few people who did go and like lock themselves to the trees. This is what we're up against, just to be clear. They came in and we called it Fort Trudeau. They threw up barbed wire fences. It was pretty intense. They raided when they caught us when we weren't there. We had cameras up, but by the time we got there, they had moved in and we weren't ready to move in fast enough. There's a large group that are connected. There's railway police that's from CN. There's also American Railway Police that come in. There's the RCMP, and then there's the TMX security people, as well as all the local hired help too. Like there's like a Lionsgate security people that just sort of are there to watch and then call if anything goes down. So it's quite, they had motion sensors, they had floodlights, they had everything trying to keep us out of there. It was pretty intense. It was a little bit bizarre, actually, in some ways, to be that kind of, in this kind of thing against your own government, right? So in looking ahead, we know that we have the economics, the science on our side. The media occasionally runs articles on this. Unfortunately, not often enough, because there's not enough getting out there on that. So we still have to keep pushing them. And how do we keep getting it back into the news? That's one of the things, to make sure that we have a chance to say our side, because TMX, we know, has been buying ads, and our government is not in the space right now where it wants to be seeing anything else. So it's really tricky. The non-compliance of COVID stuff is a good way to catch them and get something out there. You can even make complaints to WorkSafe, and they will have to come and investigate it. So that's one thing that has been, hitting the popular news. You'll notice a lot of our articles are going to be local news or alternate news. It's much harder to get into things like the Sun or the Globe or whatever, but we'll ride on that stuff. And certainly the local news agencies are very concerned about the Colony Farm. That one, I think, has a lot more interest than Holmes Creek, which to a lot of people around here, they don't even know where that is. Colony Farm, everybody knows where it is. So you've got that going for you there. But the biggest thing was that we're, as humans in this, as opposed to like an organization, we're just people. But we have way more resilience and more spring back. We're doing this because we love it, not because anybody's paying us to do it. And we bounced back and got somebody back up in the trees again within a few days. We have this wonderful fellow, Timothy, who's up there right now. And there's other people, people still going and supporting. We're about 500 meters down from where we were before. And it's just this big message to say, we're not gone. You can't get rid of us that easy. You brought in the tanks basically, but we're still here. And that definitely did get some media attention. Unfortunately, we're still working on it and trying to maintain this and trying to hold on. We really appreciate every bit of connection that we can get for that. The other thing is, you'll notice a lot of groups have sort of passed on the idea of doing any direct, like a protest. It is possible to protest outdoors and stay distanced. It is really, you can do this. We're very lucky because we have really strong support from our both municipal and our federal. Peter Julian has come out and supported us a lot. Our New West Council has put in motion. So these are things you want to be looking to try and get happening in your local area. I don't think Ron McKinnon's going to be quite as keen, unfortunately, so good luck with that one. But it doesn't mean you can't go out and have those, people holding a banner with like a 3-meter banner on either side. They're nice and far apart outside of his constituency office, those sorts of things. You can still make that happen. I think that's, I don't want to take up, I know we've already gone quite a bit, so that's us. And we're certainly welcome interested in taking more questions and stuff if you want more. Hopefully give you a bit of a taste of what we've been through and what we can pass on and how we're working to work together and keep going.
Awesome. Thank you, Maureen. And Christine, you had, I'm not sure what technical issues, but Maureen kind of gave an update where you took off, but was there any points that you were wanting to emphasize that we didn't get to yet?
Mo, did you talk about like the campaigns, like the different campaigns that we have?
I didn't mention that we had some different groups. The Adopt a Pipeline, I forgot to mention them in I was jumping in real fast there. And the idea that we have also are working on a legal action, like an injunction of our own, as well as all the other parts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Christine, you can do that.
I wanted to emphasize that I got in touch with the guys that are kind of coordinating the Adopt a Pipeline thing, and they can always use more volunteers. So if anyone's interested, I'll put the email in the chat. Basically, it's, the pipeline's a huge, it's over 1,000 kilometers, right? And even just locally, there's little bits. So they've divided into like 1 kilometer segments that, just get people, go for a walk like once or twice a week to that stretch. And then if you see any action, you can report it. And then we can kind of be aware of when we need to start mobilizing. So that was Adopt a Pipeline. I just wanted to say as well, because we are anticipating some confrontations, it's inevitable in the Brunette Corridor, which is where that endangered fish lives. I don't know how much of that came through before I got kicked off. So we have a direct action, actually 2 direct action groups that are intending to do what they can. And one of them is a prayer circle. So that's basically kind of sitting in meditation and not budging, with the possibility of indeed like facing arrest. And then we've got another direct action group that would be willing to also not budge. Yeah, so there's lots of different ways to get involved. Extinction Rebellion Vancouver also have really good things going on. They've been very, very active, and we owe a huge debt of respect to everything that they've done. Oh, and the last thing I wanted to say, so Mo mentioned the legal avenues we're pursuing. Those also become quite costly. So we do have, if anyone feels inclined to make donations, because that's going to be ramping up pretty big. In addition to the injunction, we also have an application pending right now with West Coast Environmental Law about the species at risk stuff, because the Nooksack dace is one of many endangered species along this pipeline, and it's ecocide as far as we're concerned. And so we're looking at kind of exploring that in a bit more of an aggressive way than's been done so far. So there's 2 legal things going on. And the last thing is community education. A lot of people living along the pipeline route don't even know it, right? Like the oil pipe burst in 2008. People in this Burnaby neighborhood were like, oh, my house is covered in oil. I didn't even know there was a pipe here. So we've actually put together a brochure explicitly for communities, like for households, for schools. There's 16 schools that this pipe goes right past at 900 PSI, like that's gonna be crazy, crazy explosion if that's, well, when it goes off. So we also have a community outreach campaign. So just saying there's lots of different ways to get involved. I guess the best ways, I'll put some links into the chat if that appeals to anyone. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Christine. Yeah, please post the links. We've posted the brochure, but the social media and definitely the best ways for people to get in contact to you. And Maureen, you had to go kind of quickly. Was there anything that on reflection that you missed in the uptick?
I just appreciate that somebody did bring up the idea of that we are on the Coquitlam Nation. That's where Holmes Creek is. That's where I am situated, because I'm a New West person. And that, yeah, the connections with our Indigenous neighbors and having them come and be a part of both of our action and being able to take part in various ceremonies and stuff with us has tied us together and given us a lot more I guess, of a moral ground as to why we're there, right? Not just for ourselves.
Awesome. Thank you to both Christine and Maureen. And I didn't get a chance to introduce Maureen properly, but her bio is very nice. She's a mom and a scientist of nuclear physics. Who's currently working as a teacher in the teacher training program at Simon Fraser University, and has a lifetime of involvement in social and eco-justice organizing. Like Christine, she spent 5 days in the aerial camp at the Holmes Creek, and was also arrested for blocking the gates of the TMX tank farm in Burnaby in 2018. So thank you very much for joining us. The next speaker I'm going to introduce is Laura DuPont, and I'll be honest, I've never met her. We were connected through Jane, who said, I have this amazing friend who's doing amazing work in Port Coquitlam. And to be honest, Climate Convergence has probably never organized any events in Port Coquitlam. And we don't know enough about what's being done out there. So it was a really kind of exciting connection to know to connect with people who are organizing out in Port Coquitlam. And then she sent me her bio, which is pretty impressive. She's a Port Coquitlam City Councillor. She's the president of the Lower Mainland Local Government Association. She's also a member of the Burke Mountain Naturalists and a director of the Riverview Horticultural Centre Society. She has served for 6 years on Metro Vancouver's Climate Action Committee and is a founding member of the Wondrous Tree Fellowship, which is a grassroots group dedicated to educating the community about the importance of nature and the value of trees. She's a member of the Safe Energy Leadership Alliance and vice chair of the Tri-Cities Food Security Group. And in between all of those things, she found time on short notice to come and speak with us about what she's working out in Port Coquitlam. So Laura, I want to welcome you, and you're up. Thank you.
Thanks very much for the opportunity to be here with you folks today. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Jane, for throwing me out there. I'm coming to you from the unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nations, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh. So I'll just start my story back really quickly to give you a bit of a sense of why I come to this. I ran in 2013 for city council. There wasn't much diversity on our city council back then. And I also felt that there wasn't a strong voice for the environment. And so I spent a lot of time, because I wasn't really well known in the community and I didn't grow up in Port Coquitlam. I'm originally from Alberta. I spent a lot of time talking to people on the doorstep, and I engaged a lot of people on the doorstep during the campaign by talking about environmental issues. And I learned that a lot of people in the city of Port Coquitlam care a lot about the environment, and that they have a deep appreciation for the natural values in our community. We're really fortunate in our city to be bordered by 3 rivers. We've got endless dike trails, cycling, hiking, paddling opportunities everywhere you turn. We're a really amazing community that I think we fly a bit below the radar on that. But I think a lot of people know, obviously, that Port Coquitlam offers that type of important recreation opportunities and biodiversity. So they appreciate that, as do folks in Port Moody and Coquitlam and the Tri-Cities. I came from a background in stewardships, from a stewardship group and grassroots groups. So I really have a lot of admiration for folks who build things from that strong base. I think those people, you people, do a lot to change things and shake things up and ask really important questions. So I'm always impressed by people who come together through the communities with common desires to fight for something important. When I ran for council, I obviously felt really protective that I wanted to keep these things in our community for the next generation. So a lot of the work that I've been involved with have a lot to do with protecting water resources, protecting wild salmon habitat. And of course, I've been advocating for years for trees and to rebuild the lost canopy in Port Coquitlam. I was appointed to Metro's Climate Committee, which has been a wonderful opportunity to learn a lot in 6 years. But one of the things that hit me hard was approximately a year ago, a group of young people, obviously you guys know the Sustainability Teens, they came to our climate action committee at Metro, and it was really powerful for me. They basically said that our generation, with our lack of political will to deal effectively with the climate crisis, is destroying the mental well-being of their generation. That felt like a real punch in the gut to me, and it made me sad, and I can't forget hearing those words from those young people. They were so sincere and so upset with us, as they should be. And yeah, they're so spot on, and I don't think I'm ever gonna not take this issue seriously, because honestly, they hit me where I needed to hear that. So I take it really seriously, being accountable to the community who elected me, to these young people who are the next generation. I'm really grateful to have all the opportunities to work with the Climate Caucus and the groups that were in my bio. I'm so grateful for the leadership that New West City Council has shown in regards to speaking out against this pipeline. And, MPs Peter Julian and the leader of the federal NDP, Jagmeet Singh. Great to hear, politicians speak out about this pipeline. We know this isn't where our future lies. And yeah, back to you guys. Thank you for fighting hard to push back against this. It's not over yet, and I'll look forward to hearing from Jane. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Laura, and happy to make that connection. Hopefully when it's safe to do so, we can do some events in person in Port Coquitlam. That would be awesome. I just posted the link to the New West City Council statement on TMX Pipeline and in support of land defenders in around Holmes Creek. And yeah, that's very good leadership, and we're very happy to have that statement. Next, I wanted to introduce.
Uh-oh.
I have lots of questions. Jane THOMSING, who's the chair of the Colony Farm Park Association. Again, somebody that I have never met in person and wasn't connected with until I think 3 days ago. And over the last week, we've been hearing about what's going on with the Colony Farm Park and with the Trans Mountain, and Jane can give us an update on that. And we reached out to find out if we could connect with somebody who could give us an update. And Jane is the chair and was very enthusiastic in accepting. And we're really thankful to her for taking the lead on this. And this isn't something that she's new to. The park is something that she's been involved with for a very long time. She joined the Colony Farm Park Association in 2008 while she was working at Wildlife Rescue Association of BC. She also assisted the rehabilitation of oiled wildlife after the 2007 Kinder Morgan oil rupture that Christine referred to in Burnaby. And she's been working with the Pipe Up Network for several years in efforts to stop the TMX pipelines. So Jane, can you give us all an update on what happened and what's going on and how we can support you at the Colony Farms?
For sure. Thanks so much, Thomas, and thanks for having me, and I really appreciate it. I do have a few slides, and I'll just try to see if this will work out. And if it doesn't within 30 seconds, I'll just start talking, because technical stuff isn't really my forte. Let me just see here. Sorry, guys. I'll just try one more time here, and if it doesn't work, that's okay. Oh, darn. Maybe it'll come up in a bit here, but if not, that's okay. I did want to share a few slides so that you don't just have to see my face, but I can talk about what exactly it was that I was going to by looking at my own slides. So my name is Jane, and I want to acknowledge that I am on the unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. I live by the Coquitlam River, very close. I can take a bicycle to Colony Farm Regional Park without needing to go onto a street. I had a community garden there for several years, and I have 3 fairly young children, and they have basically, Colony Farm has become like their second home. I have been involved with trying to help stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline and join the protest on Burnaby Mountain. And I guess I got really inspired because I was working at Wildlife Rescue Association for several years. And unfortunately, even though it's, I got to help with the rehabilitation of the wildlife that was oiled, I think the only reason why there was some funding resources available to those oiled animals was because it was such a public situation. We had many, many other calls about oil spills and oiled wildlife, and there were no resources. There was no funding, and we were a small, not-for-profit, underfunded organization, and often we're told to put down those animals that had been affected by oil. It was very, very sad. And so, long story short, this is what has really inspired me to stop the Trans Mountain Pipeline, as we still have no resources to protect animals that are affected by oil spills. As for Colony Farm, obviously, I think everybody's aware that it is on the unceded core traditional territory of the Coquitlam First Nation, and that I do engage with Chief Ed Hall about what we're doing and what's going on. And in fact, when I talk more about this issue, it's quite embarrassing for everybody to learn that Coquitlam First Nation found out about the latest events from myself and Laura, really. We got in touch to say, hey, did you know what was happening? And they were not included in any discussions or any decisions. And of course, that's extremely appalling. And when I reference Colony Farm as being agricultural in part, just to rewind that in the early 1900s, a part of Colony Farm, you probably many of you know that it was actually a farm, quite a successful farm, one of the most successful in British Columbia, where it involved patients from the Riverview Hospital. And they kind of had a really nice partnership, I guess you could say, going on, where the patients worked on the farm and in turn got some food back to the hospital. So when that farm shut down, the land was basically up for negotiation. And at that time, there was talk about turning it into a golf course or turning it into racetrack. All these horrible ideas, but fortunately, the Burke Mountain Naturalists and John Cashore, who was, I believe, the Minister of the Environment at the time, a great group of people campaigned to have this land protected, and in 1995, it became a regional park. So, with a land use plan of keeping it under public ownership, so open to the public, and for agricultural use and for conservation of wildlife. So obviously not for pipeline construction. So I wish I could show you this slide. It's a picture of my son when he's 4, and he's holding up an article of the front page saying, "Pipeline foes aim to protect local park." And this was in 2014. And the reason I bring this up is that this is not a new idea. It actually was proposed in 2014. At the time, Kinder Morgan had approached Metro Vancouver and asked them told them basically, we want to use Colony Farm Regional Park as an area to stage and construct the pipeline and test it for leakage before it's placed under the Fraser River. And at that time, there was public consultation and there was opportunity for public input. And of course, there was a lot of public outrage. Burke Mountain Naturalists, the Park Association, other groups came together, and we said this is not acceptable and this is not a construction site. And so I believe that due to a lot of pressure, Kinder Morgan ended up consulting with CP Rail and signing an agreement to use CP Rail property. And of course, that would come with a much, much higher cost. But they also expressed to BC Nature that they and I have a quote of what they said somewhere, but basically implying that they were committed to not using Colony Farm Regional Park to the best extent possible. And so here we are in 2020. So at that time, my son holding up the newspaper was 4 years old. And then he's again on the front page, and he's 10 now. And I don't force him into these things. He's very, very, very passionate about wildlife and environment, just like me. Was mad that I didn't put him in the protest video. So, but he's holding up the paper once again, front page, basically the same thing. Pipeline foes, it's not that topic, but basically it's a group of people again trying to protect the park. But this time it was very different because there was no public input opportunity. There was no public consultation. The Coquitlam First Nation were not engaged. And basically we were told about this decision at a meeting, and it's only because I asked questions, and we were told about this decision, that the decision had been made and that a community benefit agreement had been signed, and done deal. We must move on, basically, was the message that we were getting. I do just want to talk a little bit about the area that they're proposing to use, because the regional or the what is he, the chair, I guess, of the Parks Committee, Regional Parks Committee for Metro Vancouver, described it as some shrubbery or something, implying that this was not very important habitat. And also, well, there's a water main tunnel there, so it's already kind of like a construction site. And this is so not the case. This is it's actually meant for agricultural use. It was designated for agricultural use, really good soil. But because there hasn't been much agricultural use, it's developed into this wonderful and rare and very unique habitat. Some of you might, or many of you will know that it's called old field habitat, which is quite rare to find in the Lower Mainland. And this type of habitat is an excellent home for many different species, and lots of them are species at risk. So we have a number of different, for example, barn owls and the Oregon forest snail and great blue herons are just to name very few of the species that depend on this, not just during the birding window, but year round. In fact, currently the Oregon forest snail, their habitat is right where they plan to use the this area for the construction. And because they're hibernating, and I mean, I know there are some biologists on the call and they'll know better than me, but these are the questions we're starting to ask. Well, how on earth are you going to deal with this? We have species that are in hibernation. The assessments you're doing are going to be so incorrect because this is home to over 200 bird species, and a lot of them have yet to arrive. One of the species that many people, not just from the province, from across the country and even outside the country, come to see, the lazuli buntings that arrive there in July, a beautiful bird species that depend on this exact portion of land for nesting and mating. And also this area is very important for juvenile birds to gain strength before they do their migration. So there is a lot going on, and that probably doesn't even well, I know it doesn't begin to scratch the surface of how important this habitat is for a number of species. It's also a public park, and a new trail was put in there recently. And since the pandemic, the number of visitors to Colony Farm Regional Park has more than doubled, showing how important these areas are and natural areas are for people to have a chance to de-stress and get a breath of fresh air, have somewhere to go with their kids and with their dogs and do some wildlife viewing. So how on earth they feel that it is okay to give a 2-year permit for an oil company to come in and use this for a construction site is really beyond me. It doesn't obviously jive with the Colony Farm land use plan. And if any of you have read the regional Metro Vancouver's plan, it's all about nature connectedness and habitat, wildlife conservation and environmental conservation. So again, going against their own, documents. I just wanted to talk briefly about what happened. Like, how did we find out? And so the Colony Farm Park Association, much like you girls were saying earlier, is we're not paid. This is not our job. We do this, we volunteer because we care a lot about the environment, and we care a lot about about reconciliation. We care a lot about wildlife, and we certainly care a lot about keeping this park open to the public. And so I've been sitting as chair on this park association for many years. And like I mentioned, in 2014, when this first happened, and then they said they weren't going to use it, every meeting since then, I've always asked, has there been any change with Kinder Morgan or Trans Mountain in this time? And for 4 years, the answer was no. And then in September 2020, I asked the same question, has there been any change? And sure enough, well, actually, yes, they have talked to us that they do want to revisit potentially using the park as a construction site for the pipeline, but we don't really know anything yet. There's been no real meetings and so on and so forth, but they have applied for a research permit. So then our next meeting was in November. And we had Steve Chaffrick, who is the division manager for Central Area Parks. And he joined us. I had no idea he was coming to talk about Trans Mountain. He basically said he was coming to talk, and they care about their parks too. He was there to provide some updates about the park, one of which was, by the way, Trans Mountain does want access to the park and is planning to use it as a construction site. And we didn't really get any more information. And that's when, of course, red flags went up and volunteers and people passionate went into full alert mode. And I contacted the Parks Committee, Metro Vancouver Board. I tried contacting our Coquitlam Mayor, trying to understand what had happened. And sometimes the members would say, oh, sure, we'd love to talk to you. And 2 days later, they said, actually, we can't, because everything's in closed meetings. So finally, Neil Carley, who is the regional manager for parks, said, let's have a meeting and I'll talk to you about what's going on, but I can't tell you everything, but I'll see what we can cover. And so we had this meeting, and he said full out that yes, it was a done deal. They had agreed to let Trans Mountain use 11 acres of Colony Farm Regional Park over a 2-year period, and that they'd also signed this community benefit agreement. It sounded like they had initially been offered like $200,000 to $300,000, and they said, well, we managed to get it up to 1.4 million, which is really a drop in the bucket when you think about all the stewardship activities and certainly the environmental destruction that this is going to have at the park. And so here we are, basically. This is why and social media kind of exploded into I contacted Pipe Up Network, who are very generous in helping to sponsor our video that we put together. My first thought was, we need to get this message out to the public and fast, because there are going to be a lot of people very, very angry and upset about this, and the fact that nobody was consulted, and also especially that Coquitlam First Nation wasn't even included. And so between that and our petition and contacting media, we do feel that we've managed to really spread this message quite widely. And certainly there is a lot of public outrage about this. We've got our petition going now, which is getting close to 2,000 signatures. And I don't know if any of you have seen the video that we put together, a virtual protest video. I mean, this is only the beginning, but we're doing things quickly because we understand that they are allowed to go in there as soon as January. And what I'm trying to do now, I mean, between as we all are with everything else going on and trying to be a mom to children and everything else, it's difficult. But what I'm trying to do is engage. Like, that's why Laura is here. You know, she's a huge asset in the political world to help engage other elected officials. My hope is that enough of them will come together and make a motion to bring this decision back to the table and have it ideally revisit it and reverse this decision. I met this morning with one of the city councillors. He's also on the parks or on the Metro Vancouver board, and said, why would you agree to this? Why would you have let this happen? And basically he said, well, if we had said no, they would have had an order of entry from the Canadian Energy Regulator. And I don't know about all of you, but I just think that is not good enough. First of all, we've seen some reports come out from the CER that have been not so glorious about the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and perhaps they would have said no, or perhaps, and also these applications take a lot of time. It would have given them a lot of time to provide information about why this is a really bad idea. And so even Ron McKinnon, and I like the slide where it said maybe Ron McKinnon, he's my MP. And quite frankly, I'm very disappointed because several years ago, he said he was against the pipeline. And then obviously had a talking to, and a few months later came out and said he was in support. And even though it's not in his riding, it's about 1 or 2 kilometers from the park. And a lot of his constituents will be using this park. And he's also a Liberal MP, and they bought the pipeline. And I feel that he really needs to hear from his constituents and beyond that this is not acceptable. And I guess my other ask is for everybody to reach out to the Metro Vancouver board members. If you've seen the protest video, I did it on my own with no budget, so it's not perfect. But if you pause the last page, you'll see a link that you can find out who's on the Metro Vancouver board. And I really feel that if they get enough pressure, or some of them do, like hopefully Councillor Michael Weeb and Adrian Carr, and people that really have shown effort to protect the environment in the past, can come together and help get this decision reversed. Now, of course, failing that, I think we all have a good idea as to, how the public feels and what will happen next. But it does need to happen quickly. And, we're also grassroots, bunch of working moms and dads trying to pull this off. So I just really appreciate this opportunity to engage with all of you, because this is definitely something where we need people to come together, and people with experience on what next. And I just want to thank you all for listening to me, and just know that I really appreciate all the work that you do, and I'm just trying to do my small part from here as well. So thanks so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane. And if you email us the slides that you wanted to show, we can try and post them. But we also think we can show the video on our screen share that you put together. I think that would be useful. So I think Allison's going to show that on her screen. And just for everybody, if you go in the chat, we posted the link to the petition, as well as the link to this video. And then Jane, if you have time while the video is going on, can you just type in the best ways for people to stay in touch with you or the Colony Farm Park Association to keep updated on what you're doing and what you're asking? But sure. We're going to start the video now.
Thank you.
We can't hear the video. I do that every single time I try and share a video on Zoom.
My name is Jane THOMSING, and I am opposed to this poor decision to allow Trans Mountain to use Colony Farm Regional Park as a construction site to assemble the pipeline. This area is on the unceded territory of the Coquitlam First Nation. It is valuable wildlife habitat for a number of species at risk. It is also very valuable agricultural land that is destined to be destroyed if you allow this to proceed. And it is also a public park, and this decision was made without any public consultation.
parks matter to our community. During COVID, people have needed to use parks for social distancing, for exercise, for fresh air, to relieve stress in a very stressful time. Right now, one of the most beautiful parks in our entire region, Colony Farm Park, is being used for what I believe is an inappropriate park use. Trans Mountain Pipeline is staging on 11 acres of park space some pipeline construction with the blessing of our federal government. If you're concerned about that, please contact your MP and let them know that you feel that is inappropriate park use.
Colony Farm Regional Park. Recently, Trans Mountain has been granted access to the park to assemble an oil pipeline, and I think all the public in the Lower Mainland should be deeply concerned about this. You see, what appears to be just open field and scrubby bushland is actually incredibly sensitive to a variety of different wildlife species. Songbirds find the trees and shrubs perfect areas for nesting, while raptors will find all kinds of food opportunities, food sources in the open fields. As urban development pushes more into nature, we find that sensitive areas like this park at Colony Farms are few and far between. We need to protect the remaining habitat that we have. This is not a place for pipelines, it's a place for people, and it's a place for wildlife. Let's keep pipelines out of our parks. Let's speak up against Trans Mountain assembling their pipeline in Colony Farms.
Thank you very much to Jane for putting that together and getting everybody together on such short notice. And that's just, I think, a good demonstration of what, even if we're in challenging times during COVID, it's hard to find ways to organize it's a good example of when you're passionate and when you're connected to a community, you can get things done that really make an impact. And I think it's a good example for everybody. So that the link to that video is shared in the chat. Please share it. Please sign the petition and share it. And Jane also posted her email address to stay up to date. And the Colony Farm Park Association also has a Facebook page that you can follow. Thank you very much for that. Our last speaker before the question and answers, and if you've been posting questions, I've been putting them in a Word document so we won't lose them. And I've also posted the link to the Climate Convergence website and the information for our next meeting. If you want to come in January 6th, Wednesday, our first meeting of the new year, just send us an email and we'll send you the link. And our last speaker is Alison Bodine, who is a Climate Convergence organizer. And you know what, Alison, I deleted your bio when I was putting down the questions. So I should know it off by heart, but I'm just going to pull it up here again. But she is an organizer with Climate Convergence. And she's also a writer and researcher. And she's a journalist, author, and she focuses on environmental issues, Latin America, and immigration. Most recently, Alison's articles have been published internationally by Venezuela Analysis, Global Research Council on Hemispheric Relations, Common Dreams, Ornico Tribune, and Counterpunch. So Alison's just going to give us kind of some perspective and some national updates about what's going on with TMX before we get into the discussion and question and answer period. So thank you very much, Alison.
Thank you, Thomas, and to all of the other fantastic fighting women on this panel. I am very honored to be here with all of you and to really raise the banner of our Mother Earth in so many different ways and different perspectives. The video impacted a lot of people, you can tell in the chat, and I think we need to really share it around as a really strong example of a grassroots campaign for an important issue that's related to Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, which is going to touch so many different communities. And somehow through this struggle, we have to work in order to connect the different communities that are going to be impacted, whether it's going to be running through, like Christine said, those 16 schools, or all of the municipalities that it passes through Edmonton. So like Thomas said, I just had a little bit of perspective I wanted to share why people gather their questions and kind of think about what's next in the struggle to stop TMX. And in Climate Convergence, we have always focused on supporting local campaigns, mobilizing in the streets, working on building a mass movement for the environment that's centered on the important struggles here, whether it's Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion, the CGL natural gas pipeline up north in Wet'suwet'en, or it's the Site C Dam in the Peace River Valley, and the important struggles that we are engaged in every day, but with the perspective that we all know that stopping these projects is not enough to save our planet. These are step by step what we need to do in order to really reverse the direction that we are headed on this Mother Earth. So with TMX, we're having this webinar at a time and this important discussion when actually the project has been put on a so-called pause. After lots of bad publicity, TMX and Ian Anderson were forced to put this project on a pause. There was an injury recently on Burnaby Mountain, a very bad injury that we don't know the details of yet, but is horrible to hear about. There was a death in Edmonton, a 40-year-old man, Samatar Sahil, who left behind a wife and 4 children, was killed as part of the construction of this project, as well as continuous violations of COVID regulations, threatening both workers and the communities where these workers are situated. And I think that's something that to me brings so much to the forefront how this pipeline is really shrouded falsely behind this "we care about workers, we're giving people jobs in Canada" rhetoric, because they obviously don't care about workers when they increase their scheduling, they're pushing for construction and not putting workers' safety first. A death is a horrible thing, but also when it comes to the pandemic. So I think that's really important way to expose the disaster for the environment and for people here in Canada that this pipeline is. Then we have the Parliamentary Budget Office report, an update on the purchase by the federal government of the $2.6 billion Trans Mountain Expansion project and the existing pipeline, which we know spilt just a few months ago and will continue to spill as pipelines do. Really, this parliamentary budget officer found that the pipeline, and whether it's profitable, which we're told it's supposed to fund somehow green development in Canada, this pipeline is not going to be profitable unless Canada continues to bank on further pipeline development, tar sands extraction, and the burning of fossil fuels as the economy in Canada, which is just in direct contradiction to what Trudeau is trying to say about Canada's new climate plan. I saw earlier someone addressed the question or asked the question about this pause. And I want to say that I think so much of the pause and the continuous kind of back and forth in the courts or maneuvers of Trans Mountain are really all based on giving us continuous, good and bad news. It's a few steps forward, a few steps back. As grassroots activists, we know that. We know that there'll be some victories and there'll be some setbacks, and we'll get right back up again, like Maureen was saying. But we also have to realize that these are their tactics, including the pause. They want to give some space, make people relax, say, oh, slow down your struggle a bit, because they really are just waiting for the day when they can recognize that they've demoralized resistors or people standing up against the pipeline. I think this is really their tactic. They want to wait it out and they want to see how long we can make it. And that's why I'm honored to be here with all of you. And I think that includes the contractors too, or this kind of back and forth, contractors are dropping out or not. Yes, it shows the project's in trouble, which we've known all along, but I don't really think it shows that the government is backing down in any way. For example, in Trans Mountain's own statement about the pause, they explained how they are 20% so-called constructed on the project and said next year, 2021, we'll see peak construction for the project with thousands of people working in hundreds of sites across Alberta and British Columbia. It is during this time when one of the greatest risks to the project becomes worker safety. As if they didn't know that. They work in oil and gas. They've been doing this all along. They know what a speed up means, and they know how to keep people safe if they want to. We're also faced with John Horgan's NDP government, which was supposed to be using every tool in the toolbox to combat this project. We've been out in the streets together, continuing to put pressure on the NDP, the coalition government with the Greens, and now on the majority government when we're able to do so safely again, and are tired of hearing that we exhausted our legal possibilities when we know that a lot more could be done to stop this project. On the bigger picture, we have Canada's continued commitment to oil and gas subsidies. The TMX Pipeline, economist Robin Allen estimates, is going to be subsidized by over $8 billion by the end of it. On top of there not being a business case, she's written very well, very directly about the lack of a business case for this project. And on a bigger viewpoint, it's recently been published, for example, that between 2017 and 2019, so way after Trudeau was at the Paris agreements, putting Canada forward as a so-called climate leader, Canada and Saudi Arabia stood out as the most prolific amongst their economic peers for subsidizing oil and gas. The Paris Agreement saw Canada commit to a number of 511 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And I don't want to throw a million numbers around, but basically in the 5 years that that was signed, which we just passed, Canada's emissions continued to go up. As well, we have, of course, Trudeau's meeting with the oil executives before he even took office and everything that was exposed against that. We need to bring that up and up again so we can expose this double speak. We can't let Trudeau parade as a climate leader and build a pipeline and parade as a prime minister for so-called reconciliation and any sort of base of respect with Canada's Indigenous peoples, or the Indigenous people that are here, while at the same time refusing to acknowledge their rights and title to land or their veto of oil and gas projects. So there's the new climate plan. I thought I'd address that for just a second. Smoke and mirrors, I think, is a good way to describe it. There are so-called steps that have to be met, and it's a binding plan. Yet again, no enforcement mechanism. So what kind of binding plan really is this? The targets, let us remind ourselves, are not even Trudeau's targets that Canada says they're meeting or not meeting. It's Harper's targets that were set. Trudeau did not go farther than Harper, except through the words of this newest plan where Canada is going to be so-called net zero by 2050. But it's really hard to swallow a plan like this in the context especially of a few things. One, that Canada's government since the 80s has developed plans and targets and said that they're going to meet them and has never met them and has only continued to go over, as well as the fact that these plans in Canada and also other countries, developed countries around the world, always ignore and don't include for military emissions. The largest emitter of greenhouse gases in Canada is the Department of Defense. Don't find that in the climate plan, just as the US military is the largest polluter in the world. Also don't see those in the climate plan. And thirdly, downstream emissions. Canada cannot continue to pretend that resources extracted here on stolen Indigenous land and shipped abroad and then burnt do not contribute to the climate crisis. Canada's footprint is not the borders of Canada. Resources that are extracted here and burnt elsewhere pollute the same sky because, as we all know, we share the same air. Canada has the largest GHG footprint, in fact, by person of any of the other developed countries that are part of the G7. I don't say this to be cynical. I do not say this to get ourselves in a slump. I mean, how could we be around so many active people that were taking these facts and taking charge of them and not letting them get us down? But I say this because I think we have to understand our globe as an entire system and Canada's plan as an entire way to really go on avoiding the big changes, the system change that needs to happen that I will get to later. We have to understand that if the capitalist system continues, we will not be able to save the planet from destruction. As a Marxist intellectual said, Michael Lowy, the capitalist system, driven at its core by the maximization of profit, regardless of social and ecological costs, is incompatible with a just and sustainable future. Or as Greta Thunberg said recently on the 5th anniversary of the Paris climate agreements, if you read through the current best available science, you realize the climate and ecological crisis cannot be solved without system change. That is no longer an opinion, it is a fact. The climate crisis is only part of a bigger sustainability crisis. For too long, we have been distancing ourselves from nature, mistreating the planet, our only home. Distant hypothetical targets are being set and big speeches are being given. Yet when it comes to the immediate action we need, we are still in a state of complete denial as we waste our time creating new loopholes with empty words and creative accounting. And I think that's the lens we need to look at climate's action plan, or Canada's climate action plan through. And this to me points towards why we need to build a mass movement. We need to continue bringing these issues to the kitchen table. We need to talk to our neighbors and our friends. And I think that the example of what's happened with both the Holmes Creek Protection Camp and the Colony Farms work that's happening are both important steps towards educating people about what it really means that this pipeline is being constructed. We saw youth, but around the world, we also are inspired. We saw youth leading actions calling for 1.5 degrees, reminding that that was what was supposed to be done with the Paris agreements, even though all countries are shooting far beyond that. We've seen protests against Line 3, a pipeline that again starts in Canada and ends up in the United States. Those protests are ramping up all of the time, especially right now. And I also just wanted to point out that someone working for Enbridge, which is in charge of the construction of this pipeline, also died recently on December 21st, 2020. The resistance that is going right now is very important. Every action that we take is very important as part of a bigger whole, whether it's Colony Farms, Holmes Creek, or Lost Creek, at the US, Europe, and beyond. It is very important that we participate and support as well any other fight for the environment in Canada or around the world in the process of building a mass international movement for our Mother Earth. Not talking just about the problems that we all face, not talking about the challenges, but really doing it, especially in the forms of actions and mass mobilizing when it is safe and possible to do, and supporting others that are taking those actions. Building an international mass movement requires us to put many struggles and resistance together, because our earth is like a broken and shattered kettle in pieces, and everyone needs to pick up a piece and put it together with others. In this way, we can put the earth back into good shape and make it complete. And to me, that's what building an environment movement looks like. We need many actions and struggles. We need to do it together. And that all comes down to the necessity to have unity to confront the polluters from here in Vancouver to across Canada and around the world. And that's where I just want to encourage people to join with Climate Convergence, to join together at our next meetings and upcoming events to really help and build this movement. Right now, there's a kind of daunting quote and prediction coming out of Enbridge, because I think we're hearing a lot about oil and gas, and countries are taking other decisions, and maybe there's no future in it, maybe there's no profit. But Enbridge is continuing to talk as if it is. They have more investments in natural gas infrastructure and renewables, but at the same time, they're saying that it expects oil demand to grow worldwide until 2035, which we all know is too late. A woman named Vanessa Nakate from Fridays for Future in Uganda explained it this way. She said to so-called world leaders, "You have already determined our present, which is obviously catastrophic. Now fix the future and start now. You have everything you need to stop this war against the planet and the people, but you just won't do it. We want deep cuts from you right now." The World Meteorological Association has released a report saying that 2011 to 2020 is the warmest decade on record, with the warmest 6 years all being since 2015. The level of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is the highest it's been in 800,000 years. Most of it increasing just in the last 150. Ocean heat is at record levels, with more than 80% of the ocean in a heat wave right now, with devastating consequences to marine life. Even despite the pandemic, levels of all of the greenhouse gases are increasing. And this is a global perspective. We don't say that Canada will be the warmest, Canada's air is going to get dirtiest, or that Canada is going to have to deal with increasing amounts of plastic in our water. It's the world. We are all connected. In my vision, we need to work on developing a mass movement that recognizes this, that recognizes that the path that the world is headed towards relying on a system that depends on continuous growth and expansion, that ignores people's health, ignores the rights of Indigenous peoples, and in fact has no moral or ethical basis at all. The system of capitalism is the one that is going to take us down this path towards destruction. We need an anti-capitalist international climate justice movement to confront this, and we need to tie it back to the important local issues that we've discussed today. As Fidel Castro said, I want to end, the leader of the Cuban Revolution, head of a country that was declared by the World Wildlife Federation as the only sustainable country on the planet in 2006, meaning its footprint and its quality of life were both sustainable. He said, "Let human life be more rational. Let us implement a just international economic order. Let us use all the science necessary for pollution-free, sustained development. Let us pay the ecological debt and not the foreign debt. Let hunger disappear and not humankind. Let selfishness end. Let hegemonies end. Let insensitivity, irresponsibility, and deceit end. Tomorrow it will be too late what we should have done to do what we should have done a long time ago." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Allison. And I always remember what Eagle Eyes, who was an Indigenous elder who was a big central organizer with Climate Convergence, used to always talk about the big party that we were going to organize once TMX was canceled once and for all. And I think often about what that party is going to look like and how important stopping the TMX pipeline is going to be as far as building a movement to create a just and sustainable world. And I know it's been a challenging year for many of us trying to find ways to stay active and stay connected. But seeing that people have still been able to do that and realizing that like we actually do live we are organizing in a time and a place and a space where what we do and the outcome of our struggle can really make an important difference, not just in our own communities, but around the world. So again, I really wanted to thank everybody who's taken the time to come out on such short notice. It was also a really kind of, I think, good indication of how many people showed up and how many speakers were able to get on such short time, how much energy and interest there is in this issue. Again, we're going to be sending out an email after this that has all kind of the important links, but they're also in the chat if you want to follow up with what's going on with Protect the Planet, Stop TMX. That was all posted on how to get involved. Jane posted information. We've also got the petition and the video link up there, and we posted the link to the Climate Convergence website, as well as the email address for getting involved in Climate Convergence meetings. So there's a lot to get involved in, and I think that was nice to see, Jane. That's who we're fighting for. Now we're going to go to the Q&A section, and I just wanted to, a lot of the questions were kind of specific to the Colony Farm situation. There was the legal right of the public to protest is like, what is the legality as far as like no public consultation as far as the park? Do we have a legal right to be consulted about improper use of a public park? Is there a restoration plan for the Colony Park after the construction? So Jane, people are kind of wondering some more information about like what's going on and what we're able to do. If you, Jane, are you able to answer a few more questions about Colony Farm?
Oops. Yeah, absolutely. I might struggle to answer, all of those questions in terms of protesting. I mean, we did this in 2014. We just went right in because, as Park Association, our whole mission is about including the public in all the decisions that we have, even for what stewardship events we're holding, and then of course wildlife conservation and protection of agriculture. I mean, technically anything we do in the park we're supposed to get a permit for, but in 2014 Metro Vancouver was very supportive of our protest in the park. Now, of course, with the pandemic, it is a lot trickier. So that's why we started with this sort of virtual style protest. And then, I would love to see some elected officials really try to challenge this. Of course, the timing is terrible with the holidays. And I've sent the protest video along with a very long letter to every single Metro Vancouver board member, Parks Committee member, all the City of Coquitlam Mayor and Council, and all of Port Coquitlam Mayor and Council. Most bouncing back saying we're closed till January 4th, which isn't helpful, but I'm calling them, trying to get a hold of them. I mean, I'm talking to Laura DUPONT a lot about how we can get moving and shaking on this sooner than later, but the truth is that the time is a challenge. So, as for legally protesting or going in the park, I can't really answer that, but I would imagine there are people here who are more knowledgeable about me on how to, I don't know if I'm using the word occupy right, but on how we can show our resistance to this poor decision by getting in the park and keeping Trans Mountain out. I've participated in many protests and was there on Burnaby Mountain and in other areas, but I was never an organizer. So I'll be quite clear about that. And it's not that I'm saying I'm trying to pass the buck, but I'm really keen to hear from others on how together we can do something. Camping there would be lovely for sure. So this trail is very long. I mean, it's I don't know if people have been, but basically when you just get off Lougheed, it stretches all the way to the forensic psychiatric unit. So I mean, I was planning on doing an in-person protest, but it just takes a bit of organizing with the pandemic and ensuring everybody's comfortable and feeling safe. But because this is a long and narrow trail, there is a lot of potential, I feel, for people to set up. We obviously don't want to disturb the habitat either, but there is that nature trail that runs along this very valuable field habitat. So I guess it's really hard to answer this tonight, but that's why I put my email in there. If we can get the conversation going on ideas or how to make this happen, and my ears are wide open. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. And if there's some more specific information you felt that was needed out of those questions, Thomas, you can certainly try.
Just make comment there.
Sorry, Marie.
Yeah, just in terms of like once they put up, if it's been transferred, if the land use has been transferred to them, they'll put up signs and they'll put up fences and they will cordon it off pretty quickly too. So, and then, yeah, legal protests would have to be outside the range of that area. As soon as they have an injunction there, they can arrest you for being anywhere that disturbs it. They'll have signs up saying that. So people, like at Burnaby Mountain, we did peaceful protests where we sat on the ground and sang. And it was not, there's difference between, you can do peaceful, but it's still illegal protest where you're breaking those injunctions, but you have to have people committed and trained on how to do that safely and all that that stuff. So if there are people who are interested in that, we can certainly put you in touch with people who could help with the training.
Thank you.
I also think it's really important right now to get kind of a critical mass of attention and understanding about what's going on at Colony Farms. I think a lot of people still are not aware, but we see when people are aware of what the park is and what they're planning on doing at the park, that there's a lot of concern immediately. So I think it's really important in the next basically week, and I think there's going to be a lot of people at home on their computers based on the situation. So I think we can organize a bit more than we normally would at this time to really get the video out and get the word out about what's happening at Colony Farms. And then kind of use that kind of public interest and public outcry with whatever we organize next. And there's a lot of elected officials who are part of the Metro Vancouver who've gone on record as being opposed to the pipeline, and we need to demand that they put their money where their mouth is. And we have a mayor of Vancouver who was very public in opposition to the pipeline, who was arrested at Burnaby Mountain for opposing the pipeline. So let's get some support from people who said that this is something that's important to them. And now it's a time where we're kind of the rubber is literally hitting not the road, the park, and we need to kind of demand some accountability. And the more people that are involved, I think, the better. There was an important question that was asked, which I think is going to take a while to answer, but is one that we're always kind of going back and forth on. Is under what conditions is TMX most likely to be stopped? Assuming that ultimately that would take a decision by the federal government, which has invested both economic and political capital in it. So I'm going to put that out. Any of the speakers can choose to answer that right away, or you can kind of choose to marinate on it and come back to it in your final comments. But I'm just going to also ask the speakers, is there any other questions that we put in the chat that you saw that you wanted to address right now?
I can just address the question. I believe someone was asking about alternatives to using the park. And so, as I mentioned, CP Rail, there was a contract between Trans Mountain and CP Rail. So I guess a good question is, well, why are you not using CP Rail? What happened with that contract? They're saying it has to do with the width of the pipe and space and curvature and all this stuff. But when I look at the map of what they're planning to use in Colony Farm Regional Park, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because the land that they were proposing to use at CP Rail is actually wider. And also in the press release that Trans Mountain released, they talk more that it has to do with safety. And again, why would the park be safer than the property right next door? I don't know. And obviously, I'm sure we all know that the price of using CP Rail would be exorbitantly higher than using a public regional park. And so I think there's just a lot of information we don't know. And it's so frustrating that this was all done in closed meetings. So we're having to do all this extra detective work. And but the more I can find out, I'll certainly be willing to, obviously willing and happy to share. I just don't have all the information yet.
Great, thank you. Any other of the speakers who wanted to address anything specifically?
I just have something I wanted to share.
And then Christine after you.
Mine's probably less related, but that's fine. I wanted to share a map that actually Trans Mountain has put out that talks about how many communities the pipeline is going to go through. Can you see that?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. So this is just, I think, as we all consider kind of, the organizing and the important connections that are being made tonight and other ways through other meetings as well about our united fight, to remind ourselves of really all the communities that this is going to go through and for how long. So I found this map useful when I was looking online again. I mean, we know where there are people organized and protesting, and also just to acknowledge as well the protesting and actions that are taking place in Clearwater and in Kamloops. I'm going to find the link and can share it later for how to follow the work that Miranda Dick and others are doing there, as well as the tiny house warriors around the Blue River region. And just we know that it's going to get most intense when we're here in Coquitlam and in Burnaby and in Surrey and kind of close by, but just to remind ourselves of really all the other places where there will be growing and continuing resistance. That was all.
Thank you. Christine?
Thanks for that. Yeah, I just wanted to just kind of bring up, you know, we've kind of spoken a lot about Indigenous title and rights and decolonization and truth and reconciliation. And I just want to remind us all that we're kind of called to stand behind our Indigenous brethren. They've been doing this work for centuries, and we have amazing privilege. And I know for myself, like I've really felt like that was a real motivator for me to just realize, like, yeah, I've had such comfort, and what's it like to actually, you know, feel the cold, hard steel of the colonial capital's fist, you know, to face razor wire, to face the, you know, because we don't typically need to do that, we white settlers. So I feel like for myself, it's been a real invitation to live as a real citizen of the earth. And yeah, I guess I just encourage all of us to think about how we can stretch our comfort zones a bit, because this matters. Like, I think we've all demonstrated that, I don't know if we're at a tipping point, but there's a lot of shit going down right now. You know, like even just like the planets are aligning, like what the heck? So I'd say if ever there was a time to really flex the agency of our privilege, it is now. And there's lots of different ways to do it. I just wanted to kind of voice that a bit. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, I've got Maureen and then Laura, and then actually after Maureen and Laura, then we'll kind of do a last call for questions, and I'll give everybody an opportunity to make kind of your last statements. But Maureen and Laura, these don't have to be your final words if you're addressing questions.
I was simply going to piggyback off what the last two were saying, because when you look at the municipalities, it doesn't show the native land, but I know that a third of the area goes to the, and I'm always saying the name wrong, so someone will help me with this, Coquitlam people. They're the ones that have, unfortunately, 60 years ago when the original pipeline was put through, they didn't even legally have the right to speak out against it in any way. They weren't allowed to oppose it. They weren't allowed to have a say. And this time around, it was said, well, it's just being twinned. It's just, so you can't oppose it now because it's not new. So they're caught in like a complete catch-22 in terms of, you know, we talk about rights, about do we have the rights to our own park, that kind of thing. They don't have the rights to their own home. When you've been evicted from a place that you felt like you belong to, and you get kicked out and treated like a terrorist for wanting to trying to stop them from ripping it down, you start getting a feeling for what has been going on for generations and what's wrong with our system. So there's this one pipeline means a lot of different things in so many different ways, and all of them are bad, unfortunately. So I really do appreciate us coming together as a community to work on finding all the ways to stop all of those things from happening.
Thank you. And Laura?
Thanks very much, Thomas. So thank you for those really important points, Christine and Maureen. You couldn't have been more articulate in making that point. I'm fine for this to be my final words this evening. Again, thanks for the opportunity. And I just urge everyone, we need to hold the federal government to account. So I think probably the best thing, if you want to connect with your elected officials, I think go straight to your MPs. You know, it's the federal government we need to we need to be on about this. I think Metro Vancouver, has had a situation where they're, kind of being told, obviously, that there isn't much that they're able to do. So contact your MP, phone them, email them, connect with them, and don't let up, because they're the ones we need to hold accountable on this. So thanks, everyone.
And thank you very much, Laura, for joining us. It was a very good connection for us to make, and hopefully we'll be able to build on that from here. I'm going to put people on the spot just to go kind of chronologically again. So Christine, I'm putting you on the spot, and then Maureen, and then Jane, and then Allison. If that's okay, if you've got kind of final comments, things that you want to emphasize. And just a reminder to people that we are going to be sending out an email. If you didn't get all of the important links, we'll be sending out the email with those ASAP.
Okay, on the spot. Stop TMX. Rest up, but don't get too comfortable, and communicate by phone, not by text. Or leave the phone in the garage or in the microwave and communicate that way, and avoid infiltration.
Thank you, Christine. Maureen?
Yeah, it is quite a strange thing to go from being sort of the mom and the teacher and always the law-abiding citizen to suddenly being seen as knowing I'm on a watch list and all those sorts of things simply because I, sat on the ground and sang with some people. So it is really important to recognize, I think, that when someone asked about how we can do this, like which thing is it's going to work, and that's the problem, is you never know. Rosa Parks didn't know when she went and refused to get up on that bus that she was going to change history right then. She was just tired and frustrated. We don't know. The suffragettes, how long did they have to fight? And these fights can take a while, but it's when people don't give up and when we work together and we do feel there is some momentum. Things are coming together. There are so much bad press for them right now. I think if we do keep pushing, there are cracks showing, but we need to work together. And yeah, I think our collective will definitely can carry the day. We just have to be willing to stick our shoulders to that. And yeah, take breaks when you need to, but tag off and then come back when you're ready, because we need you all. Thank you very much for being here.
Awesome, thank you. Jane?
Oh, yeah, well, thank you, Christine and Maureen, again, for that, good reminder, and certainly where we come from a place of privilege, and the message you shared that we all need to keep top of mind, I think, at all times with all these efforts that we're making. And I guess in closing, I'll just go back to my roots, which was working with wildlife, and how obviously we are all very aware of the habitat that wildlife is losing worldwide and all these things and issues that they must deal with. I think just for one example, birds of prey. We're hearing from OWL, the raptor rehabilitation facility in Delta, how they're constantly receiving owls and birds of prey that are being poisoned because they're going after rats and mice and other things that are poisoned because they're in people's homes. And, Colony Farm is one natural area that they have for hunting grounds. And that's just, again, one tiny example of why it is so important for us to fight for wildlife and help make sure that they have some habitat left. Like I said, over 200 bird species are living at Colony Farm, and numerous other mammals and reptiles, amphibians and insects. And we've seen a decline already in numbers there of certain species. So really important, I think, as a wildlife advocate, I ask everyone that cares about our wildlife to keep them top of mind too in this fight against TMX. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome, thank you very much, Jane. And then final words from Allison, please.
Yeah, I guess Laura's done. Sounds good. I've been struck by a thought today as we've been talking, partly about what I think is the question of consultation, especially as people have pointed out, of Indigenous peoples, but also of people, and how many of these decisions are made without any discussion, without us even knowing what's going on, how we have to reach and search out who approved that, or with whose signature did this decide to go through. And I think when it comes to war, and when it comes to the war on our planet, these decisions are being made without any reverence being made to our input as people. This is where billions and billions of dollars are going. The government of Canada bought a pipeline using taxpayer money that isn't going to make a cent and is going to further destroy the planet and go through unceded Indigenous territory without permission. It's something that in this day and age, we can pretend like, or we can say that we've gained a lot, and we certainly have, in being able to protest and gather together and express our voices. But where is the real consultation and our real right to say no, stop, enough? And that's what we need to be saying to TMX. And I think those are the conditions that it's going to take for the government to abandon this project. It takes all of the work that we're all doing, and it takes building really a mass movement for our planet. All of the communities, all of the Indigenous nations that this pipeline will pass through, we need to be putting on this united pressure, and we need to make this an issue where people understand the fireball that will be generated if an earthquake happens and starts on Burnaby, and the fire starts on Burnaby Mountain. How many lives will be lost? How many people's futures will be completely taken away? And that is only a microcosm of what is happening in so many countries. And so I think that each time that we come together is another strong sign that we're not slowing down. And I really appreciate the comments from Maureen about, tapping out, having someone else come in. And to me, that's what that means, is consistency. And that means not letting up. And I think that's what we have all done, and what Climate Convergence has done during these difficult times of the COVID-19 pandemic, coming up with new and creative ways to protest, to keep up the pressure. We're all still learning, but really just, I want to appeal to people to get involved, to join with Climate Convergence, to come to our next meeting, to come with your ideas, and let's keep building for a united and an international climate justice movement from here locally all the way around the world. Thank you.
So, and Laura, are you good, or did you want to say something? You're good? Okay. So thank you very much to all the panelists and to everybody who came out. When we decided to call a forum on a couple of days' notice on December 22nd, we weren't quite sure what to expect, but I think we're very happy with the outcome. We've made some new connections. We've got some new ideas. We've got some continued energy, and we're really committed. I think that's something that shone through with all of the speakers and with all the people who are participating, is that, like people said, there's a lot of ups and a lot of downs, but we are committed to doing what we can, and we're not 100% sure exactly the way to make this pipeline canceled, but we do know that if we keep organizing, we have a fighting chance, and that we can actually do this and build a better world. So thank you very much to everybody. We're going to send an email. I'm also going to post one last thing in the chat, which is a letter we're asking people to send to their MLAs about the Site C Dam, which is another campaign that we're really concerned about. But stay tuned. It's all connected, and we are going to keep fighting. And the more that work together, the better chance we have. But thank you very much, everybody. We appreciate it.